Have you ever noticed how one small moment with your child can suddenly spiral into guilt, anger, or self-blame that stays with you all day? You promise yourself you'll stay calm next time, yet in the heat of the moment, the same patterns repeat. What if the real problem isn't your child's behavior, but the silent thoughts running through your own mind? In this audiobook-style summary, you'll discover how simple, practical ideas from cognitive behavioral therapy can help parents calm their emotions, break negative thought cycles, and model emotional strength for their children. You'll learn how thoughts shape feelings, feelings shape reactions, and how changing one small inner habit can completely transform your parenting experience, without yelling, punishment, or guilt. This book matters deeply for parents because children don't just learn from what we say. They absorb how we think, how we handle stress, and how we talk to ourselves when things go wrong. When parents feel anxious, overwhelmed, or emotionally stuck, that tension quietly enters the family atmosphere. This book offers a gentle way out, not by being perfect, but by becoming more aware. The opening chapters begin with a simple but powerful idea: our emotions don't control us, our thoughts do. Most parents believe stress just happens to them. The book challenges that belief kindly. It explains that between what happens and how we react, there is always a thought. Often, it's so fast we don't notice it. A child spills juice, and the thought flashes, they never listen. A toddler refuses bedtime, and the thought appears, I'm failing as a parent. A teen talks back, and suddenly the mind says, I've lost control. But they are not facts, they are interpretations. And interpretations shape emotions. When the thought is harsh, the emotion becomes intense: anger, fear, shame, or hopelessness. The book gently helps parents see that changing emotions doesn't start with forcing calm, it starts with noticing the thought that created the storm. One story shared early in the book mirrors many homes. A parent comes home exhausted. The house is noisy. Homework isn't done. The immediate thought is, I can't handle this anymore. That thought brings a rush of anxiety and irritability, and suddenly the parent snaps. Later comes regret. CBT doesn't judge this moment. Instead, it asks a curious question: what if that thought wasn't the only possible explanation? The book explains that the brain is constantly trying to protect us, but it often overreacts. It exaggerates danger, assumes the worst, and jumps to conclusions, especially when we're tired or stressed. Parents are especially vulnerable because they care deeply. Fear for a child's future, safety, or behavior can quietly turn into catastrophic thinking: if my child struggles now, they'll struggle forever. This is where CBT introduces one of its most helpful ideas: awareness before change. You don't fix thoughts by fighting them. You begin by noticing them. The book encourages parents to slow down and gently ask, what am I telling myself right now? Not to judge the thought, just to hear it. Once parents begin noticing their inner dialogue, something powerful happens. Space appears. Instead of reacting automatically, there is a pause. And in that pause, choice becomes possible. How children learn emotional patterns by watching us. When parents react impulsively, children learn that emotions are overwhelming and uncontrollable. But when parents pause, reflect, and respond with intention, children learn that emotions are manageable, even big ones. A simple everyday example is shared. A child throws a tantrum in public. The parent's automatic thought might be, everyone is judging me. That thought creates embarrassment and panic, which leads to harsh discipline or rushing the child. But when the parent learns to challenge that thought, I'm allowed to take up space. My child is learning, the emotion softens. Calm replaces panic. The response changes. This chapter makes it clear that CBT isn't about positive thinking or pretending everything is fine. It's about realistic thinking. It's about choosing thoughts that are balanced, fair, and grounded in reality, especially when parenting feels overwhelming. Another powerful idea introduced is that emotions are not enemies. Many parents try to suppress anger, anxiety, or sadness. CBT teaches that emotions are signals, not problems. They are messages from the mind asking for attention. When parents learn to listen instead of react, emotions lose their power to control behavior. The book gently reassures parents who worry they're damaging their children because of emotional struggles. Change doesn't require perfection. Even small moments of awareness, one pause, one reframed thought, begin to reshape the emotional climate of a home. As this opening chapter closes, the message is hopeful. You are not broken. Your child is not broken. What feels like emotional chaos is often just unexamined thinking running on autopilot. And once you learn to see it, you can change it, step by step. Thought value here. This is a great moment to subscribe and turn on notifications. The next chapter goes deeper into how thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are connected, and how parents can interrupt negative cycles before they reach their children. Chapter 2. As the book moves forward, it deepens one of the most important ideas parents can ever learn: thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are always connected, whether we notice it or not. This chapter helps parents finally understand why they keep reacting in ways they later regret, even when they truly want to do better. The book explains this connection in a very human way. Something happens first: a child refuses to listen, has a meltdown, or says something hurtful. That event itself is neutral. It doesn't carry emotion on its own. What gives it emotional power is the meaning we assign to it in our minds. The thought appears almost instantly, often without words. And then the emotion follows. After that comes behavior. For parents, this cycle can feel like a trap. A thought like, "My child is doing this on purpose," leads to anger. Anger leads to shouting or harsh discipline. Later comes guilt and self-blame. The next time something similar happens, the brain remembers that pain and reacts even faster. The cycle tightens. This chapter gently reassures parents that this doesn't mean they are weak or bad at parenting. It means they are human. The brain is wired to protect us, and when it senses stress, it jumps into survival mode. In that mode, logic quiets down and emotion takes over. One of the most powerful parts of this chapter is how clearly it explains that behavior is often the last link in the chain, not the first. Parents usually try to change behavior directly, both their child's behavior and their own. They say things like, "I just need more patience," or "I need to stop yelling." But CBT shows that behavior changes most easily when thoughts change first. Relatable example. Imagine a parent whose child refuses to get dressed for school. The automatic thought might be, "They're trying to make me late." That thought sparks frustration. Frustration leads to snapping or rushing the child. The child, sensing tension, resists even more. The behavior on both sides escalates. But when the parent pauses and considers a different thought, "My child is struggling, not defying me," the emotional response shifts. Instead of anger, there may be concern or curiosity. That emotional shift leads to a calmer response, such as offering help or simplifying the task. The child often softens too. Not because they were forced, but because the emotional tone changed. This chapter also introduces the idea that children are extremely sensitive to emotional energy. Even when parents say the right words, children feel the underlying emotion. A calm tone paired with angry thoughts still communicates tension. That's why inner work matters just as much as outward behavior. The book then gently addresses anxiety, which is very common for parents. Anxious thoughts often sound like, "What if? What if my child falls behind? What if this behavior never changes? What if I'm ruining them?" These thoughts feel responsible, even loving, but they quietly fuel fear. Fear then leads to over-control, micromanaging, or constant correction, which can overwhelm children and strain the relationship. CBT doesn't tell parents to stop caring. Instead, it teaches them to separate realistic concern from imagined catastrophe. One practical suggestion from this chapter is learning to ask, "Is this thought helpful right now?" Even if a thought might be true someday, if it's creating panic in the present moment, it may not be useful. That children often mirror the thinking patterns they observe. A parent who catastrophizes teaches a child to expect the worst. A parent who pauses, reframes, and problem solves teaches resilience, without ever giving a lecture. The chapter also explores guilt, something many parents quietly carry. Thoughts like, "I should be better than this," or "other parents don't struggle like I do," are especially harmful. These thoughts don't motivate change, they drain energy. CBT encourages parents to replace should thoughts with kinder, more accurate ones, such as, "I'm learning," or "this is hard, and I'm doing my best today." What makes this chapter especially comforting is its reminder that changing one part of the cycle changes the whole system. You don't need to fix everything at once. You don't need to control every emotion. Even one small shift in thinking can soften emotions and lead to better choices. By the end of this chapter, parents are invited to see themselves with more compassion. You are not your reactions. You are not your worst moments. You are a person learning to notice the space between thought and action, and that space is where change lives. If this is resonating with you, take a moment to like this video or subscribe. The next chapter moves into practical tools parents can use to identify unhelpful thinking patterns, the kinds that quietly increase stress, anxiety, and conflict at home, and how to gently challenge them without forcing positivity. Chapter 3. As this chapter opens, the book turns its attention to something parents often don't realize they're doing all day long, believing every thought they have. The author explains this with warmth and reassurance, not criticism. Thoughts feel convincing because they sound like our own voice. They arrive quickly, confidently, and often emotionally charged. But this chapter helps parents understand a life-changing truth. For many parents, a thought is not a fact. This realization alone feels like a breath of fresh air. The book explains that the mind is constantly telling stories about what things mean. When a child slams a door, the story might be, "They don't respect me." When a child struggles in school, the story might be, "I've failed them." These stories feel real, but they are interpretations, not reality itself. This chapter introduces the idea of unhelpful thinking patterns, the kinds of thoughts that quietly increase stress, anxiety, and emotional reactions. Parents are especially prone to these patterns because they care deeply and feel responsible for another human being's future. One common pattern the book explores is all-or-nothing thinking. This shows up when parents think in extremes: "My child is always difficult," or "I never get this right." These thoughts leave no room for growth or nuance. They turn temporary struggles into permanent identities, for both parent and child. Another pattern many parents recognize immediately is mind reading. This is when we assume we know what our child is thinking or intending without real evidence. A child ignores a request, and the thought appears, "They don't care." That thought leads to hurt and anger, even though the child might simply be distracted, tired, or overwhelmed. The book also talks about catastrophizing, imagining the worst possible outcome and treating it as inevitable. A toddler's tantrum becomes, "They'll never learn self-control." A teenager's bad grade becomes, "Their future is ruined." These thoughts feel protective, as if worrying will prevent harm. But in reality, they flood the body with stress and make calm parenting almost impossible. What makes this chapter especially powerful is how gently it teaches parents to notice these patterns without judging themselves. The goal is not to stop thoughts from appearing, that's impossible. The goal is to stop automatically believing. Parent-friendly practice: when you notice a strong emotional reaction, pause and ask yourself, "What am I telling myself right now?" This question creates space. It moves you from reacting to observing. A relatable example is shared. A parent watches their child struggle socially and thinks, "My child doesn't fit in. They're going to be lonely." That thought brings sadness and fear, which may lead the parent to hover, interfere, or pressure the child to socialize. But when the parent pauses and gently challenges the thought, "My child is learning at their own pace," the emotion softens. The parent can respond with support instead of panic. This chapter emphasizes that challenging a thought doesn't mean denying reality. It means asking whether the thought is fair, balanced, and helpful. Parents are encouraged to look for evidence both for and against a thought, just as they would if a friend came to them feeling overwhelmed. Another important insight here is that children absorb how parents talk about situations, and about themselves. When parents frequently label themselves as bad parents or children as difficult, those labels quietly shape family identity. CBT helps parents replace labels with descriptions. Instead of, "my child is difficult," it becomes, "my child is having a hard moment." The chapter also addresses anger, something many parents feel ashamed to admit. The book normalizes anger while showing how certain thoughts pour fuel on it. Thoughts like, "they should know better by now," create rigid expectations that clash with a child's developmental reality. When parents replace "should" thoughts with curiosity, what skill is my child still learning? Anger often gives way to moment in this chapter is the reminder that children don't need perfect parents. They need parents who are willing to reflect, repair, and grow. When parents model noticing and correcting their own thinking, children learn that mistakes are part of learning, not something to fear. As this chapter closes, the message is empowering. You don't have to control every thought. You simply need to learn how to step back and choose which thoughts deserve your attention. That skill alone can reduce emotional overload and transform everyday parenting moments. If this chapter is helping you see your inner world more clearly, take a moment to like or subscribe. The next chapter moves into practical, everyday exercises parents can use to calm intense emotions, especially in moments of anxiety, frustration, or overwhelm, using simple CBT tools that fit real family life. Chapter 4. By the time we reach this chapter, the book begins to feel very practical. Up to now, parents have learned that thoughts influence emotions, and emotions influence behavior. Now the focus shifts to a question many parents quietly ask: what do I do in the moment when emotions feel too big? When a child is crying, yelling, refusing, or when a parent feels overwhelmed, anxious, or close to snapping, what helps right then? This chapter introduces one of the most reassuring ideas in the entire book: emotions rise and fall naturally if we don't fight them. Many parents believe strong emotions must be shut down immediately, either in themselves or in their children. But CBT teaches something gentler and more realistic. Emotions are like waves. When we stop feeding them with fearful or critical thoughts, they peak and then pass. When a child starts calming down after a meltdown, a parent might quietly acknowledge it. Not with a lecture, but with presence or a simple comment like, "I see you're trying." This teaches the child's brain that calm behavior brings connection. The chapter also talks about parents reinforcing their own behavior. Many parents only notice their mistakes. CBT invites them to notice moments they handle things even slightly better. Pausing before reacting. Speaking more gently. Walking away instead of escalating. These moments matter. The brain learns from repetition, not perfection. A major theme here is consistency over intensity. Parents often try to change behavior with strong reactions, lectures, punishments, emotional appeals. CBT suggests that calm, predictable responses are far more effective. Children feel safer when they know what to expect. The brain relaxes when patterns are clear. The book shares an example of a parent who used to respond differently every day depending on stress levels. Sometimes they ignored behavior, sometimes they exploded, sometimes they overcompensated with guilt. This inconsistency confused the child and increased acting out. When the parent shifted to calmer, more consistent responses, even if not perfect, behavior slowly improved. Another key idea in this chapter is breaking behavior into small steps. Parents often expect immediate change, which leads to disappointment. CBT reminds us that change happens gradually. A child who struggles with transitions may not suddenly become flexible, but they can improve one step at a time. The same is true for parents learning new responses. The book encourages parents to choose one behavior at a time to work on. Not everything. Not forever. Just one small, realistic goal. This reduces overwhelm and increases follow-through. Parents often make emotional moments harder by adding extra meaning to them. A child's tantrum becomes, "This always happens," or "I can't handle this," or "I'm failing." These thoughts keep the nervous system activated. The body stays tense. The emotion lingers longer than it needs to. Instead, this chapter introduces the idea of grounding, helping the brain return to the present moment. Grounding is not about forcing calm. It's about gently anchoring yourself when emotions start to spiral. A simple example is offered. A parent notices their chest tightening and thoughts racing during a conflict. Instead of reacting immediately, they pause and focus on something concrete: the feeling of their feet on the floor, the sound of their breathing, the weight of their body in the chair. This small act tells the brain, "I am safe right now." Once the body feels safer, the mind can think more clearly. This is especially important for parents because children often borrow their sense of safety from the adults around them. When a parent slows their breathing or softens their posture, the child's nervous system often responds without a single word being spoken. The chapter also talks about emotion labeling, which many parents find surprisingly powerful. When emotions are named in simple language, "I'm feeling overwhelmed," or "this is frustration," the intensity often decreases. The brain feels understood instead of threatened. This works for both adults and children. There's a relatable parenting moment described in the book. A parent feels anger rising when a child refuses to cooperate. Instead of suppressing it or exploding, the parent quietly says to themselves, "This is anger. It's uncomfortable, but it will pass." That simple acknowledgement prevents the anger from turning into shouting. The parent stays present. The situation doesn't escalate. Is that avoidance strengthens fear. Many parents avoid situations that trigger anxiety, difficult conversations, public meltdowns, setting boundaries, because they want immediate relief. But the book explains that avoidance teaches the brain that the situation is dangerous. Over time, anxiety grows. CBT encourages parents to gently face discomfort instead of escaping it. Not all at once, and not perfectly, just enough to show the brain that discomfort is survivable. For example, instead of avoiding bedtime battles entirely, a parent might choose one calm boundary and stick with it, even if it feels uncomfortable. Each time they do this without catastrophe, confidence grows. The chapter also introduces the idea of small, doable steps. Parents often feel overwhelmed because they expect themselves to change everything at once. CBT works differently. It focuses on small shifts that add up over time. One calmer response. One kinder thought. One moment of pause. This approach is deeply reassuring for parents who already feel stretched thin. You don't need more willpower. You don't need to become a different person. You simply need tools that work with your brain, not against it. Another important point the chapter makes is about self-talk during emotional moments. Parents often speak to themselves in ways they would never speak to their children. "Get it together. Why are you like this? You're messing this up." These thoughts increase shame and emotional intensity. CBT gently invites parents to experiment with compassionate self-talk instead. Not fake positivity, but realistic kindness. "This is hard. I'm allowed to struggle. I can handle this moment." These thoughts don't erase difficulty, but they reduce the emotional load. Modeling this self-compassion is one of the greatest gifts parents can give their children. Children who grow up seeing adults regulate emotions with kindness learn to do the same. They learn that emotions are manageable, not dangerous. As this chapter comes to a close, parents are reminded that calm is not the absence of emotion. Calm is the ability to stay present with emotion. That skill takes practice, patience, and grace, not perfection. If this chapter is helping you feel more grounded and understood, this is a wonderful time to like, subscribe, or share. In the next chapter, the book moves into how parents can gently change behavior, their own and their children's, using CBT principles that focus on learning, not punishment. Chapter 5. As this chapter begins, the book gently shifts focus from managing emotions to something parents think about every single day: behavior. Not just children's behavior, but their own as well. Many parents feel stuck in a cycle where emotions are understood, yet the same patterns keep repeating. A child still refuses to listen. A parent still reacts in ways they later regret. This chapter offers a hopeful message: behavior is changeable, even when emotions are difficult. One of the most freeing ideas introduced here is that behavior does not need to wait for feelings to disappear. Parents often believe they must feel calm, confident, and motivated before they can act differently. CBT challenges that belief. It teaches that action can come first, and emotions often follow. The book explains this with a simple truth: when we change what we do, we send new information to the brain. Over time, the brain updates its emotional responses. This is especially encouraging for parents who say, "I know what to do, but I don't feel like I can do it." CBT responds gently, "Do it anyway, small and imperfect," and the feelings will catch up. A parent who feels anxious about setting boundaries might wait until they feel braver. But anxiety rarely disappears on its own. Instead, the parent chooses one small boundary and follows through, even with a shaky voice. The brain notices that nothing terrible happens. Confidence slowly grows, not because fear vanished, but because action came first. This chapter also introduces the idea of behavioral experiments. Instead of labeling behaviors as successes or failures, CBT invites parents to see them as experiments. What happens if I respond this way instead? This removes pressure and shame. Parenting becomes a process of learning rather than proving worth. There's a relatable scenario shared where a parent usually gives in when a child protests loudly. The immediate relief feels good, but later comes guilt and frustration. The book reframes this moment as an opportunity to try something new. The parent experiments with calmly holding the limit and offering empathy instead of surrendering. It feels uncomfortable at first. The child resists. But afterward, the parent notices something important: the discomfort was temporary, and the sense of self-trust that followed was lasting. Another powerful concept in this chapter is reinforcement, what we unintentionally reward through our responses. The book explains this carefully, without blame. Parents often reinforce behaviors they want to stop simply because they are trying to survive the moment. Attention, reassurance, or giving in can accidentally teach the brain, this behavior works. CBT doesn't suggest withdrawing love or becoming cold. Instead, it encourages parents to reinforce the behaviors they want to see more of. Calm communication. Effort. Small steps in the right direction. Even brief moments of discussion about motivation. Parents sometimes assume children misbehave because they don't care or aren't trying. CBT offers a kinder explanation: many behaviors persist because children lack skills, not motivation. When parents shift from asking, "Why won't you?" to "What's getting in the way?" their responses become more effective and compassionate. This chapter also speaks directly to parents who feel discouraged. It acknowledges that setbacks are normal. Old patterns resurface under stress. CBT does not interpret this as failure. It sees it as information. Stress reveals where more support or practice is needed. Parents are reminded that progress is not linear. A calm week does not guarantee the next one will be easy. But every effort strengthens neural pathways that make future calm more accessible. Toward the end of the chapter, the book brings attention back to the parent-child relationship. Behavioral change is most effective when it happens within connection. Children are more willing to learn from parents they feel safe with. CBT techniques work best when paired with warmth, empathy, and respect. The chapter closes with a reassuring message: you do not need to control your child to guide them. You do not need to eliminate emotion to change behavior. You only need patience, consistency, and the willingness to try again. If this chapter is helping you see behavior, yours or your child's, in a more hopeful light, this is a great moment to subscribe and stay connected. The next chapter will explore how thoughts quietly shape daily parenting decisions, often without us realizing it, and how small mental shifts can create big emotional relief for families. This chapter is really about making everything you've learned actually stick in real life. By now, the book understands something very honest about parents: insight alone doesn't change habits. You can understand CBT perfectly and still fall back into old reactions when you're tired, stressed, or overwhelmed. Chapter 6 exists to normalize that, and to show parents how to keep going without giving up on themselves. The core message here is simple but powerful: progress comes from practice, not perfection. The brain doesn't change because of one good day. It changes because of repetition over time. That's especially important for parents, because parenting stress doesn't disappear, it comes in waves. The book explains that when parents slip back into old patterns, they often think, "This isn't working," or "I'm back to square one." CBT gently reframes this. A setback doesn't erase progress. It simply shows that the brain defaulted to familiar habits under pressure. That's not failure, that's biology. This chapter encourages parents to expect difficult days and plan for them with compassion instead of criticism. One helpful idea is having a reset mindset. Instead of replaying mistakes or feeling ashamed after a tough moment, parents learn to ask, "What can I do differently next time?" This keeps the focus forward, not backward. Another key point is consistency over intensity. Parents don't need long therapy sessions or perfect routines. What helps most are small, repeated actions: pausing before reacting, questioning a stressful thought, choosing a calmer response even once a day. These moments quietly rewire the brain. The chapter also reminds parents that emotional regulation is not a solo job. Support matters. Whether it's another parent, a partner, a friend, or a professional, having someone who understands the process reduces burnout and keeps motivation alive. The tone is reassuring. You don't need to master CBT to benefit from it. Even partial use creates change. Each time you respond with awareness instead of autopilot, you're teaching your brain, and your child's brain, a new way to handle life. Chapter 7. The final chapter feels less like instruction and more like reassurance. By this point, the book understands that parents don't need more pressure or more rules. What they need is confidence, the quiet kind that comes from knowing they can handle hard moments, even when emotions are strong. The chapter begins by reminding parents that emotional struggles are not signs of failure. Anxiety, stress, frustration, sadness, these are part of being human. The goal of CBT was never to remove these feelings, but to change the relationship we have with them. Parents who learn CBT don't become emotionless. They become more flexible, more aware, and more compassionate toward themselves and their children. One of the most important ideas in this closing chapter is that the brain is always learning. Every reaction, every thought, every small choice sends a message to the brain about what to expect next time. When parents repeatedly pause, question unhelpful thoughts, and choose calmer responses, even imperfectly, the brain slowly rewires itself. What once felt impossible begins to feel familiar. The book gently reassures parents who worry, "What if I forget everything I've learned?" The answer is comforting: you don't need to remember everything. You only need to remember one thing in the moment: pause. That pause is where change lives. Even a brief pause breaks the automatic cycle of thought, emotion, and in this chapter is about self-trust. Many parents struggle because they don't trust themselves anymore. Years of stress, guilt, or comparison have made them doubt their instincts. CBT helps rebuild that trust by showing parents that they can observe their thoughts, choose their actions, and recover from mistakes. Over time, this creates a deep sense of inner stability. The chapter also speaks directly to long-term resilience. Children don't learn emotional strength from parents who never struggle. They learn it from parents who struggle and recover. When children see adults calm themselves, admit mistakes, and try again, they learn that emotions are manageable and growth is possible. There's a quiet but powerful message here: your child doesn't need you to be perfect, they need you to be present. CBT tools support presence. They help parents stay connected during difficult moments instead of being pulled away by fear, anger, or self-judgment. As the book closes, it invites parents to think long-term. Parenting is not about winning today's battle. It's about shaping a relationship that lasts. The skills learned through CBT, awareness, flexibility, compassion, don't just help with anxiety or stress. They help children grow into adults who understand their emotions and believe they can handle life's challenges. The final reflection is deeply encouraging. Change is not dramatic or sudden. It's quiet. It shows up in calmer mornings, softer responses, quicker repairs, and a growing sense of peace inside the home. These changes matter more than parents often realize. And as you reach the end of this summary, here's the most important takeaway: you are not broken, and neither is your child. With understanding, patience, and practice, both of you can grow stronger. This audiobook-style summary has brought you clarity, comfort, or hope. Take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with another parent who might need it today. More gentle, practical parenting book summaries are waiting for you, and you don't have to walk this journey alone. Thank you for listening.